Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we are looking at a new topic that I want to talk about. Something I've kind of been interested in. I want to do a little mini series here, a 3-part series talking about pretty much how Konami can go about supporting these underdeveloped types in Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm not talking about pure monster types. I'm talking about kind of those weird types. The 3 I'm talking about here are Flip, Gemini, and Spirit. These are completely underdeveloped types in Yu-Gi-Oh! They were much more popular in early Yu-Gi-Oh! There's honestly not even a ton of cards for each of them. But I do think at one point Konami's going to come around and say, like, you know what? This type of monster has a little cult following. They deserve it. They had some relevant cards in classic Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's go back and give them their due diligence. So like I said, breaking this up into 3 parts, little mini series. The first one, this video is going to be on flip monsters, and then the other 2 will come later. And this is also relevant because we do have the Power of the Elements TCG new archetype coming. It is confirmed to be an archetype based around an unexpected type of monster. I think that could be any of these 3. I think any of these 3 actually fits that to a T. I do think it'll be one of these 3 if I had to guess. I hope it's Flip. Flip is my favorite out of the 3, but of course, everybody's welcome to their own opinion. But I do think any of these 3 could end up being like the basis for the new TCG exclusive archetype, and hopefully it's something pretty good. We'll see though. So before we get into like the actual way that I would want to see Konami approach helping out a flip archetype, I want to do a little bit of a backtracking and look at Yu-Gi-Oh! History, because we have some kind of examples of what I'm looking at here when it comes to like fusions and rituals, okay? Both of these mechanics are inherently flawed, mainly as like resource engines. Like they're flawed in that way where modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! And even for years and years now has been based on resources, right? You have to out-resource your opponent. Once you out-resource them, you win the duel in a lot of instances. Most instances, I would say. And these mechanics were inherently flawed because to do a fusion, you need bare minimum 3 cards. And to do a basic ritual, you need bare minimum 3 cards. And so you're just going hecka minus using these mechanics. And so Konami pretty much went out and said, you know what? No, we want to make these types of monsters like relevant and still able to play because they have so much history in Yu-Gi-Oh! And they deserve to be playable. So they went about it in 2 different ways. I think the best example for fusions is like Shadalls. They did 3 different things with Shadalls that made them like crazy. The first thing is like materials that float. So once you fuse with stuff, they get you resources from grave. Very big. Secondly, you have fusion monsters that not only are threats on the field, but also provide you resources. All of the Shadalls, when they leave the field, are getting you a resource back. And thirdly, busted fusion spells. We've seen this over and over again over the years, pretty much since Shadal's inception. We've seen the most recent one is going to be Branded Opening in a couple weeks here, but we've also seen Fusion Destiny, Red Eyes Fusion, Shadal Schism, Shadal Fusion, even Dinomorphia has 2 like really busted fusion trap cards. And so on and so forth. So they use those things to like circumvent the fact that you in a normal fusion summon you go -2, and it makes it so it makes up for that minus and actually makes it work. But I think it's funny that they went ahead and said, you know what, individual archetypes can deal with that. So when they make a new fusion archetype, they're kind of like, okay, let's give them their own individual crazy fusion card. They have stuff that supports it, like Verite Anaconda and stuff, but still at its core kind of holds that same idea of like each individual archetype still needs its really good like cards, like individually in those 3 ways and slightly other ways, but mainly those 3. And for rituals, you kind of see the same thing, right? But in this case, they actually kind of made like some more generic, applicable to everything kind of cards. As far as Drytron goes, this is an engine that's going to support probably any ritual archetype that comes later on. It just is. It's going to be crazy. It's just so good. And not only this, but we have like ritual cards that were already generically crazy. I mean, we've in the last couple of years got Diviner of the Herald, insanely awesome normal summon for ritual decks as well, but also stuff like Prep, Pre-Prep, the Cyber Angels as an engine, like really crazy cards all over the place really for rituals. They just needed an engine like this to really put it all together. And so, yeah, I just think it's funny that they went about it in 2 different ways. We'll come back to this a little later on, but it's cool that Drytrons ended up being like a generic archetype and a lot of generic good cards that can apply to any ritual deck. And then with fusions, Konami just said, every time we make a fusion deck and we want it to be good, let's just give it these busted things. Floatability, resource, boss monsters, and like crazy fusions. So yeah, let's get into the flip part of this now that we've looked at the history of that stuff. And I think the first thing we need to look at is Subterror, because this is the closest thing Konami's ever gotten to as far as pushing a flip deck to actually kind of working around the hindrance that flip monsters inherently provide. And obviously, it's not really a resource problem as much as like the fusion and ritual types were. It's more of just like a speed thing. Like flip decks were just way too slow, especially if you go second. Setting a monster into a full board in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh was just like a death wish. It's impossible. Unless you're playing something like Subterror. But even in that case, your win rate's still probably pretty low. And so what we need to see is I think we need to see flip decks that don't necessarily have to be stun decks. Like they can do more outside of just flipping. And that's something that like we've seen the evolution of all these cards come out with multiple effects, doing a bunch of different things all at once. What if we get flip monsters that just also have really good extending effects that are even apart from the flip effect entirely, right? And so when you look at Subterrors, we've already seen this, that like just with the Subterror stuff, just being able to go Hidden City, search Guru, set the Guru, Hidden City effect to flip the Guru up and search whatever you want, whether it's a Fiendus for a negation, whether it's a final battle for the ability to get a quick flip on the opponent's turn, whatever you want. There's actually like, obviously that's like a pretty good play, and it's a straight up +2. Really solid. Which brings me to my next point. This is a new card that I want to reference here because this card is so cool, but they kind of just made it for the wrong archetype, in my opinion. So this is Crawler Sumo. Card got revealed about a week ago for Power of the Elements, and it is a support card for crawlers, obviously. But I looked at this, and when I really thought about it, I was like, oh my god, if this card read Subterror, this card would have been actually huge for that deck. This card would have been so cool for them. So this card pretty much reads, target one face-up monster you control, flip that monster face down to summon him from hand. Pretty cool. That works with your deck, just getting stuff reset so that he can jump out of the hand, and he's a big body. Doesn't have to be a big body, but it's nice that he is. The second effect says, during your main phase, you can reduce his level by a certain amount to summon a certain amount of different named crawlers from the deck. Which is also really cool, in face-up or face-down defense position. And I looked at this and I was like, if this was a Subterror card, and instead of doing like the levels, like 2 or 4 thing, and it said just like, do something, like just once per turn you can summon a Subterror from your deck in face-up or face-down defense position, I would have been like, oh my god, this card's insane. And I would have gone crazy. It's still really insane though. Just even putting it in the context of a 1-card combo. Now think about going activate Hidden City, search Guru, set Guru, City effect to flip Guru face up, and Guru search Suma. Now you can go Suma targeting the Guru to summon himself and reset the Guru, which is really nice, just get him reset. Then you use Suma effect to summon like Umastrix from the deck, face down. And right then and there, you literally used 1 Hidden City and it got you set Guru, set Umastrix, still have a big body on forward in the form of, this dude. And then that just goes with whatever else you drew. That's 1-card combo, you're going to have 4 other cards in hand. You could easily have a final battle to get quick flips on either the Umastrix or the Guru. If you already have a Fiendus in hand, obviously that's really good because you just have the Omni Negate ready, and so on and so forth. It would just add an extra layer of the ability to jump on the board and just get you there so much faster. The problem with Umastrix was like you almost were never setting him up until like turn 3 at the absolute earliest, and that's very early, and that's like if you drew a very heavy like Subterror hand. But most duels you weren't even summoning until like the very end, just to like completely out resource your opponent. And so with a card like this would just give us such more easy access to stuff like that, just to keep everything going, and it would be really, really nice. And if you saw this card with like any other card, this could just get you Guru from the deck. Now, you won't be able to flip Guru up that turn for free, but if you drew like this plus Final Battle and any other monster, that gives you Guru set plus a Final Battle to at least flip Guru up to get a free Fiendus from the deck, to at least get an Omni Negate. And you just have like all these bodies like on the field. And I like that. I like that the deck could potentially just take off as an engine that like actually gets you so many more monsters on the field so much faster. And that would be really cool. And I don't know why we don't have more cards like this to support like flips. Like every flip deck just ends up being like a raw, like awful stun deck where you have to just set everything. Awful going second. because flip monsters just, I mean, I guess they could do that as well, make more flip decks that like have effects where like if your opponent does something while they're set, they can flip themselves up and then interrupt the opponent. That would be something else that's kind of interesting as far as being a new archetype, which is another thing to note, is that I think that's another thing to look at here, is like Drytron just got a generic engine, like it was a generic ritual engine that ends up supporting every other ritual archetype in the game, whereas in the Shaddoll case, they just said, let's just make some good fusion decks. They're not going to generically apply to everything, but they're just going to be good in their own right. They're going to have their own good cards. What if we just got a really good new generic like flip-based archetype that just kind of can splash in with something like Subterror and just like work together? That's another alternate win condition, another way for you to apply board pressure. Doesn't take your normal summon, and so they just synergize really well. They are able to flip each other up and down. That could be something really, really cool. And if that happened in this new archetype for Power of the Elements, I would not be mad at all. I guess the only other thing I should mention is just the only real good generic flip support card I found was Fall Wind, Spirit of the Fall Wind. It's Stratos. When it's normal, someone can search any flip monster. It's bad. It's really bad in something like Subterror, but if we got an archetype that, like I said, expands the horizon on what they can do with like flip monsters, where like, yes, it has a flip effect, and that's really good. But also has an effect to like extend himself onto the field from hand. That makes this card a lot more interesting in an archetype like that. Just an example. But yeah, I'd really be curious where they would go with flip monsters. I think this is a great idea. It almost hurts me when I go back and look at this and I'm like, because I'm such a huge fan of Subterror, not so much of Crawler. But when I read this card, I'm literally like, oh my gosh, if this card had Subterror in the name, I would, like, it'd literally be so cool. I would be so stoked to play Subterror again. But Subterror is just so one note right now. You know what I mean? It's just either find City or set a Guru and play it slow, and then just set the rest of your hand. It's almost a stun deck, not even a control deck at this point. But if it had more ways to play, it would feel more like a control deck and not just one note. You just do your Hidden City thing. You activate your Red Eyes Fusion if you have it and you're playing it. And then you just, like, you know, if you don't see those, you just lose. So I'd love to see like a little more expansion on that kind of stuff. Doesn't have to be Subterrors. Like I said, it could be a new engine, but we'll see. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover today. Hopefully it wasn't too all over the place. I know I can ramble a little bit there, but I also want to hear your guys' thoughts for sure. Let me know how you would want Konami to approach this, whether you want them to give a new engine that can splash into other flip decks, or if you want them to just go out and say, here, give us another Sumo, like something similar-ish to Sumo, but Subterror, or whatever other flip archetype you like. Worms? No, not worms. Yikes. I'm going to get the hell out of here, guys. Thank you so much for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not yet, and let me know your thoughts down below. Of course, I will see you in the next one. Peace.